What would happen if I told you that Hamilton's disqualification was not a mistake, but the revelation of an uncomfortable truth that Ferrari wanted to hide? When Lewis Hamilton was disqualified from the China Grand Prix, many immediately assumed that it was more carelessness in the configuration of his new car with Ferrari. A typical technical error that could arise due to the complexity of the regulation or even for the lack of adaptation of the British pilot to his new team. But the truth was much deeper, and Ferrari soon admitted, the exclusion was not accidental. It was the direct consequence of a strategic decision that aimed to push the technical limits of the car, with full knowledge of the risks. Fred Vasseur, director of the Ferrari team, confirmed it bluntly. Since the beginning of the season, the SF25 had shown serious problems with its filming height. And it was not a minor detail. The rigidity of the suspension, the dynamics of the flat background, the distribution of weights and the aerodynamic distribution were compromised by a design that, on paper, promised a step forward, but that on the track turned out to be a technical commitment with very dangerous consequences. In Shanghai, the team authorized Hamilton to squeeze its final stand. After his second stop in boxes with cooler tires, he was told that he could attack aggressively. It was not an innocent order. It was a planned movement, knowing that this aggressiveness would take the car to the physical limit of the regulation. He opted that the flat background could resist, but it was not so. The subsequent analysis revealed that the wear of the bottom of the SF25 had exceeded the legal margins. The measurements showed 8.6 mm on the sides and 8.5 mm in the center of the car, when the minimum allowed is 9 mm. A very important difference, but enough to invalidate all its performance. The problem was not an accidental deviation due to potholes on the track, nor an irregularity in Hamilton's driving. It was the result of intentional planning, a way of validating internally how much it could sacrifice the car structure without compromising performance. The answer was clear: too much. The most revealing was not only the number but what it meant. It meant that Ferrari had decided to take a risk that other teams did not dare to run. Deliberately exposed the regulation in order to gain time on the track. It was a declaration of intentions. Priority was immediate performance, although that implied technical consequences or sanctions. And that puts the state of Ferrari in 2025. From the paddock, this situation was interpreted as the confirmation of something that had been suspected from the preseason. Ferrari was walking down a tightrope with his new car concept. Not only in terms of performance but in terms of legality and technical sustainability. It was no longer a car that had specific failures. It was a machine that could only give up if all available margins of the regulation were forced. This revelation has left a deep mark on the competitive environment of Formula One. Because it is no longer just a Ferrari problem, it is a message to the rest of the grid. Even the most historical equipment can be making desperate decisions when the design fails. And in the case of Ferrari, that despair materialized with the disqualification of the most laureate pilot in the modern history of the category. Hamilton's disqualification was not an isolated fact or a simple tactical slip. It was the visible tip of a defective technical structure that has conditioned Ferrari since before the official start of the 2025 season. Actually, what was uncovered in China was a design crisis that has forced Maranello's team to rethink the same basis on which he built his ambition for this year. The SF25, the car that promised to return Ferrari to the technical domain, arrived with a completely reviewed concept in its architecture. Inspired by the success McLaren had when introducing aggressive aerodynamic changes in 2024, Ferrari opted to redesign both his front and rear suspension. The problem is that this evolution was not balanced. On the front axis, the team opted for a pull rod type suspension system, a configuration that seeks to optimize aerodynamic flow and release space under the hunter of the car. This decision had logic from an aerodynamic point of view, since they sought to improve the downwash and channel the air towards the ground more efficiently. However, this change compromised the mass distribution and modified the general dynamic balance of the chassis. But where the weakness really exploded was at the back of the car. There a pull rod suspension was also implemented, but in this case, the results were catastrophic. The gearbox was trimmed to lighten weight and reduce size, which left less space to implement high-capacity dampers. This generated a less rigid structure, which collapses under pressure when the car is loaded with fuel or suffers aggressive weight transfers. The result: a loss of braking stability, aerodynamic rebounds in high-speed sections, and a filming height impossible to control during a career stint. To this structural problem, an alarming operational limitation was added. The optimal performance window of the SF25 is dangerously narrow. Any small change in track temperature, side wind, or variation in the weight of the car due to fuel wear completely unbalanced its behavior. It is as if Ferrari had built a car that can only work in ideal conditions, and as we know, in Formula One that is a fantasy. One of the clearest examples was seen in China's own Grand Prix. In the first stint, with full fuel load, the two SF25 suffered to stay stable in fast curves. To compensate for this, the engineers raised the filming height. But that decision stole aerodynamic load. In the second stint, they tried to recover that load by lowering the car, which resulted in the wear that ended up disqualifying Hamilton. It was a kind of technical sandwich without exit. If you raise it, you lose rhythm. If you lower it, cross the legal limit. And it is not a minor issue, because this deficiency is not something that can be corrected with a simple aerodynamic update. It is a concept failure, an integrated weakness in the DNA of the car. Modifying it in full season would require remake the rear of the chassis, redesign homologated pieces, and face the limitations of the technical and cost cap regulations. Moreover, this situation places engineers in a permanent paradox. Each circuit demands a different solution, but Ferrari cannot adapt without sacrificing performance, reliability, or even legality. They are trapped in their own design, trying to find magical formulas that allow them to survive until they can introduce deep improvements. But that could be too late. The implications of this technical crisis go far beyond a simple disqualification. What happened with Hamilton in China is only the first visible symptom of a deeper disease that threatens to compromise the entire Ferrari sports project by 2025. Because when the base design fails, it is not about losing a career. There is a risk of losing a whole season. Ferrari has opted his entire future to SF25. The investment in research and development for this car has been massive. From Maranello technical departments were reformulated, new talents were incorporated in key areas of vehicle dynamics and CFD, and simulation methods were renewed with the aim of breaking with the conservative inertia of past seasons. What nobody expected was that this radical structural redesign generated such a difficult product to manage in real career conditions. The impact already feels internally. The technical team has been forced to adapt its planning. Instead of focusing on the evolutionary development of the car like the rest of the leading teams, Ferrari now needs to redirect part of its resources to solve a concept problem. That means time, money, and personnel that cannot be dedicated to improving pure performance or preparing the jump to the 2026 car, the year in which new regulations will enter into force. At a competitive level, this situation has crumbled any illusion of a controlled season by Ferrari. There is no longer talk of attacking the championship, but of surviving the calendar while looking for a structural solution. And that is serious because while Ferrari stumbles with their own design errors, McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull continue to add points, develop their cars, and move away in the table. What happened in China was not just a timely sanction to a pilot who was looking for the limit. It was a direct attention call to the entire technical and sports structure of Ferrari. The Hamilton incident not only revealed an infraction to the regulation, but uncovered the internal complexity of a team that is pushing its car that has intentionally crossed the border between innovation and infraction. What this represents for the 2025 season is deep. We are not facing an isolated error, nor before a simple technical adjustment that can be resolved with a pair of aerodynamic updates. We are facing a team that built such an ambitious car in its concept, that its own architecture has made it incompatible with the operational reality of a championship where every technical detail counts. Ferrari has designed a car that can only perform if almost perfect conditions are given. And in Formula One, that simply does not happen. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, has been caught in a storm that did not cause. Your talent, experience, and adaptation cannot supply the structural defects of the SF25. And although its disqualification in China may seem like a stain in its history, it has actually served to crudely expose the limits of the car that now leads. It is a technical warning, a reflection of the raw reality that Ferrari lives at this start of the campaign. Charles Leclerc does not escape this conflict either. His role as the internal reference of the team has been tested in the absence of the car's consistency. And although his deep knowledge of the team makes it an indispensable figure, the accumulated technical frustration is already noticeable in its strategic decisions on the track. Both pilots are limited not by their hands or their decisions, but because of the material that has been given to them. And that leads us to a deeper reflection. Is Ferrari able to reverse such a critical situation in real time, within a season where each point counts, and each failure can cost championships? Can such a legendary team, but at the same time exposed for its history and its name, redesign your destiny in full competition? What do you think? Does Ferrari still have the ability to correct the course without starting from scratch? Are we facing a simple fall or in front of the collapse of a concept that should never have been approved? We want to know your vision. Leave it in the comments.